The sound of Jake's accusations still rang in my ears as I stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing a pot with unnecessary vigor. "Maybe the problem is you, Maggie," he had said, his words cutting deeper than any knife. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my trembling hands. At 35, I never imagined I'd be here, defending my worth as a woman based on my ability or inability to conceive. "Jake," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to talk about this." He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. "What's there to talk about? We've been trying for 2 years, Maggie. 2 years." I turned to face him, drying my hands on a dish towel. "I know, and it's been hard on both of us. But have you considered that it might not be just me?" Jake's eyebrows shot up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we should both get tested. It's the only way to know for sure." The silence that followed was deafening. Jake's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, anger, and finally, something that looked suspiciously like fear. "That's ridiculous," he scoffed, but I caught the slight tremor in his voice. "There's nothing wrong with me." I took a step closer to him. "Then prove it. Let's both get checked out. It's the logical next step." Jake's jaw clenched. "I don't need to prove anything. This conversation is over." He turned to leave, but I wasn't done. "Jake, wait," I called after him. "We can't keep avoiding this. It's tearing us apart." He paused at the bottom of the stairs, his back to me. "Drop it, Maggie. Just drop it." As he disappeared upstairs, I sank into a kitchen chair, my head in my hands. How had we gotten here? The loving couple who once dreamed of a house full of children now reduced to this: accusations and avoidance. The shrill ring of the phone startled me out of my thoughts. I answered it without checking the caller ID, a mistake I immediately regretted. "Maggie, dear." Ellen's saccharine voice filled my ear. "I was just calling to check in. Any good news yet?" I closed my eyes, willing myself to remain calm. My mother-in-law's not-so-subtle inquiries about grandchildren had become a weekly occurrence. "No, Ellen," I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "No news." "Oh," she said, her disappointment palpable even through the phone. "Well, you know what they say, dear. Just relax and it'll happen when you least expect it." I bit back a sharp retort. If I had $1 for every time someone told me to just relax, I could afford the best fertility treatments money could buy. "Thanks for the advice, Ellen," I managed to say. "I'll keep that in mind." After a few more minutes of stilted conversation, I hung up the phone, feeling drained. Between Jake's accusations and Ellen's pressure, I felt like I was being squeezed from all sides. I walked to the window, gazing out at the neatly manicured lawn of our suburban home. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But inside, cracks were forming, threatening to shatter the life we'd built. A movement caught my eye: Jake getting into his car. He hadn't said he was going out. As I watched him drive away, a feeling of unease settled in my stomach. There was something he wasn't telling me, some secret he was keeping. In that moment, I made a decision. I was done being the scapegoat, done shouldering all the blame. It was time to find out the truth, no matter where it led. Little did I know, my search for answers would unravel more than just our fertility struggles. It would uncover a web of lies that would change everything. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the calendar on the wall. Another month, another disappointment. The red circle marking my expected period seemed to mock me. I tore the page off, crumpling it in my fist. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Ellen, Jake's mother, standing there with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Maggie, dear. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by," she chirped, bustling past me into the house. I forced a smile. "What a surprise, Ellen. Jake's not home right now." "Oh, that's all right. I came to see you," she said, settling herself at the kitchen table. "Any news?" I knew exactly what she meant. "No, Ellen. No news." Her smile faltered for a moment. "Well, have you tried?" "We've tried everything." I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. "And we're going to get tested. Both of us." Ellen's eyebrows shot up. Both of you? But surely Jake doesn't need to. Yes, he does, I said firmly. It takes two to make a baby, Ellen. She pursed her lips, clearly disapproving. I just don't understand why you're putting my son through this. It's unnecessary stress. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. It's not unnecessary. It's the responsible thing to do. Ellen reached across the table, patting my hand in a way that felt more condescending than comforting. Darling, I know you're frustrated, but have you considered that maybe this is, well, God's plan? I pulled my hand away, anger flaring in my chest. God's plan? To make us miserable? To have Jake blame me for something that might not even be my fault? Now, Maggie, Ellen said, her tone sharp, let's not get hysterical. I'm sure Jake doesn't blame you. I laughed bitterly. You don't know your son as well as you think you do, Ellen. The tension in the room was palpable. Ellen stood up, smoothing her skirt. I can see you're upset. Perhaps we should continue this conversation another time. As I showed her to the door, she turned to me one last time. Just think about what I said, dear. And do try to be more supportive of Jake. This must be so hard on him. The door closed behind her, and I leaned against it, fighting back tears of frustration. How dare she? How dare any of them act like this was my fault alone? I marched to the bedroom, pulling out my laptop. If Jake wouldn't willingly get tested, I'd make the appointment myself. As I searched for fertility clinics, a notification popped up on the screen. An email from Jake to an unknown address. My finger hovered over the mouse. I shouldn't. It was an invasion of privacy. But after everything, didn't I deserve to know the truth? I clicked. The email was short, but its contents made my blood run cold. I can't keep living this lie, Jake had written. She deserves to know the truth. What truth? What lie had Jake been living? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me back to reality. I quickly closed the laptop, my mind racing. As Jake's footsteps approached, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. The bedroom door opened, and Jake walked in, his face unreadable. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Jake nodded, a resigned look in his eyes. Yes, we do. There's something I need to tell you, Maggie. In that moment, I knew our lives were about to change forever. Whatever secret Jake had been keeping, it was time for the truth to come out. And I was ready, come what may. I paced the living room, my mind reeling from the conversation with Jake. He hadn't told me the truth he'd hinted at in his email. Instead, he'd deflected, talking about work stress and how he needed time to think. The tension in our house was thick enough to cut with a knife. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Ellen standing there, a bright smile on her face and a gift bag in her hand. Surprise, dear, she chirped, pushing past me into the house. I brought you a little something. I forced a smile. Ellen, this really isn't a good time. Nonsense, she interrupted, settling herself on the couch. There's always time for family. I bit back a retort and sat across from her, eyeing the gift bag warily. Go on, open it, Ellen urged, practically bouncing with excitement. With reluctant hands, I reached into the bag and pulled out a stretchy band of fabric. A belly band. My heart sank. It's for when you start showing, Ellen explained, her voice dripping with false cheerfulness. And look, there's more. I dug deeper and found a small charm. A stork carrying a bundle. It's for good luck, Ellen said, reaching out to pat my knee. I just know it'll help. I stared at the items in my lap, a mix of emotions churning inside me. Anger, frustration, and an overwhelming sense of being misunderstood. Ellen, I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I appreciate the thought, but this isn't helpful. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I thought you'd be thrilled. I took a deep breath. We're not pregnant, Ellen. We're not even close. And these gifts, they're just a reminder of what we don't have. Ellen's face fell. Oh, Maggie. I'm sorry, I didn't think. That's right. I cut in, my patience finally snapping. You didn't think. You never do. You just assume and push and pressure, without considering how it might make me feel. Ellen's eyes widened in shock. I'm only trying to help. Well, you're not, I said, standing up. You're making things worse. Jake and I are struggling, and your constant interference isn't helping. Interference, Ellen gasped, clutching her pearls. I'm his mother, and I'm his wife, I shot back. Or at least I'm trying to be. But with you constantly hovering and Jake keeping secrets. I stopped short, realizing I'd said too much. Ellen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. What secrets? What are you talking about? I shook my head, suddenly tired. Nothing. Just please, Ellen. I need you to back off. Give us space to figure things out on our own. Ellen stood, her face a mask of hurt and indignation. Well, I never. If this is how you treat family, Maggie, perhaps you're not cut out for motherhood after all. Her words hit me like a slap. Without another word, I walked to the front door and held it open. Ellen huffed past me, pausing on the porch. You'll regret pushing me away, she warned. Mark my words. As the door closed behind her, I leaned against it, sliding to the floor. The belly band and charm lay discarded on the coffee table, mocking reminders of my perceived failure. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I was done being the victim, done letting others dictate my worth. It was time to take control, to find out what Jake was hiding and why. I stood up, a new determination coursing through me. If Jake wouldn't tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. Whatever he was hiding, whatever lies he'd told, I would uncover them all. As I headed to our home office, ready to start my investigation, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different, stronger, more resolute. No more games, I whispered to my reflection. It's time for the truth. I sat at Jake's desk, my heart pounding as I rifled through his drawers. This wasn't like me invading his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. The house was quiet, Jake away at a work event that felt more like an excuse to avoid me. As I pulled open the bottom drawer, something caught my eye. A small, leather-bound book, hidden beneath a stack of papers. I hesitated for a moment before pulling it out. It was heavier than I expected, and when I opened it, a photo slipped out. My breath caught in my throat. The picture showed Jake, younger and carefree, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. They were both beaming at the camera, and the woman was holding a baby. What on earth? I whispered, my hands shaking. I flipped the photo over. On the back, in Jake's handwriting, was a date from 8 years ago and 3 names. Jake, Sarah, and Emily. The room seemed to spin around me. Jake had another family? A child? How could he have hidden this from me? I dove back into the drawer, pulling out more papers. Birth certificates, old bills, letters. All evidence of a life Jake had never told me about. As I pieced together the story, tears blurred my vision. Jake had been married before, had a daughter. But why keep it a secret? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me back to reality. I scrambled to put everything back, my mind racing. Should I confront him? Pretend I didn't know? As I heard the front door open, I made a split-second decision. I grabbed the photo and the book, tucking them into my pocket. Then I rushed to the kitchen, trying to look busy as Jake walked in. Hey, he said, his voice wary. Things had been tense between us since our last conversation. I turned to face him, fighting to keep my expression neutral. How was your work thing? Jake shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Fine. Just a long meeting. I nodded, my throat tight with unshed tears and unspoken accusations. Jake, we need to talk. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Maggie, I'm tired. Can't this wait? No, I said firmly. It can't. I found something today, and I need you to explain it to me. Jake's face paled. What are you talking about? With trembling hands, I pulled out the photo and held it up. I'm talking about this. About Sarah and Emily. About the family you never told me about. The color drained from Jake's face. He stumbled back, gripping the kitchen counter for support. How? Where did you find that? Does it matter? I shot back. What matters is that you've been lying to me our entire marriage. You have a child, Jake. A daughter. How could you keep that from me? Jake's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how to tell you. It was all so complicated. And then we started trying for a baby, and I thought. You thought what? I demanded. That it would just go away? That I didn't deserve to know. Jake reached for me, but I stepped back. Maggie, please. Let me explain. I shook my head, anger and hurt warring inside me. No. I don't want to hear any more lies. I want the truth, Jake. All of it. And I want it now. As we stood there in our kitchen, the air thick with tension and unspoken truths, I realized our marriage would never be the same. Whatever Jake was about to tell me would change everything. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Start talking, Jake. And don't leave anything out. The ball was in his court now, and as I watched him struggle to find the words, I knew that the life we'd built together was balancing on a knife's edge. Whatever came next would either make us stronger or tear us apart completely. Jake's confession hung in the air between us, each word a dagger to my heart. I stood there frozen as he poured out the story of his past. A whirlwind romance, a hasty marriage, the birth of his daughter Emily, and the bitter divorce that followed. I was young and stupid, Jake said, his voice cracking. I thought I could just start over, leave it all behind. I never meant to hurt you, Maggie. I laughed bitterly. Never meant to hurt me? You've been lying to me our entire marriage, Jake. Every moment, every conversation about having children. It was all based on a lie. Jake reached for me, but I stepped back. Please, Maggie. I love you. We can work through this. I shook my head, anger and betrayal coursing through me. Work through this. You have a child, Jake. A daughter you abandoned. How am I supposed to trust anything you say now? As the reality of the situation sank in, a thought struck me. Does your mother know? Jake's silence was answer enough. Of course, I said, the pieces falling into place. That's why she's been so obsessed with us having a baby. She wants you to have a do-over, to replace the child you left behind. Jake's face crumpled. It's not like that. Emily. She's better off without me. Her mother remarried, and her stepfather adopted her. I thought it was best to stay away. Best for whom? I demanded. For Emily? Or for you? The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths and shattered dreams. I want a divorce, I said quietly, the words surprising even me as they left my mouth. Jake's head snapped up. What? No, Maggie, please. We can fix this. I'll do anything. I held up a hand, stopping him. There's nothing to fix, Jake. Our entire relationship has been built on lies. How can I ever trust you again? As the reality of my decision sank in, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For years, I'd blamed myself for our inability to conceive, carried the weight of our failing marriage on my shoulders. But now the truth was out, and with it came a sense of liberation. I'll be staying at my sister's tonight, I said, moving towards the stairs. I need time to think, to figure out what comes next. Jake followed me, his voice desperate. Maggie, please. Don't do this. I love you. I paused at the top of the stairs, turning to face him. If you loved me, you would have told me the truth from the beginning. Love without trust isn't love at all, Jake. As I packed a bag, my mind raced with all the implications of Jake's revelation. Our struggles to conceive, the pressure from Ellen, the years of guilt and self-doubt. It all took on a new, painful clarity. I walked out of our bedroom, bag in hand, to find Jake waiting in the hallway. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face a mask of regret. What are you going to do? He asked softly. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. I'm going to do what you should have done years ago. I'm going to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As I walked out of our house, the weight of Jake's lies lifting with each step, I realized this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal battles and emotional turmoil. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. No more lies, no more secrets. It was time to reclaim my life and my identity, separate from the shadow of Jake's deception. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Jake in the rearview mirror, a solitary figure standing in the doorway of the life we'd built together. But I didn't look back. My eyes were fixed firmly on the road ahead, and the uncertain but liberating future that awaited me. I stood in our living room, facing Jake across a chasm of broken trust and shattered dreams. 2 weeks had passed since I'd left, and now I was back to collect some belongings. The air between us crackled with tension. "Maggie," Jake began, his voice strained, "I've been thinking about us, about everything." I steeled myself, expecting another round of apologies and excuses. But what came next knocked the wind out of me. "I want a divorce," Jake said, the words hanging heavy in the air. For a moment, I couldn't speak. After everything he'd done, after all his pleas for forgiveness, he was the one asking for a divorce? "You want a divorce?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, not meeting my eyes. "I think it's for the best. We can't go back to how things were, and I don't think I can be the man you deserve." A laugh bubbled up inside me, bitter and hollow. "The man I deserve? Jake, you haven't been that man since the day you decided to lie to me about your past." He flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through? The guilt, the self-doubt, the constant pressure to conceive? And all along you had a child you'd abandoned. How could you do that to me? To Emily?" Jake's face crumpled. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I thought I was protecting you, protecting Emily. Protecting us?" I scoffed. "You were protecting yourself, Jake. Your comfort, your lies." As the weight of everything crashed down on me, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Jake wanted a divorce. And surprisingly, I found myself ready to agree. "You know what? You're right," I said, my voice steady. "We should get a divorce." Jake's head snapped up, shock written across his face. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to agree so readily. "Maggie, No." I cut him off. "You don't get to backpedal now. You wanted this, and you're going to get it. But on my terms." I walked to the bookshelf, pulling out a photo album. Inside was a picture of Jake and me on our wedding day, smiling and full of hope. I held it up. "This marriage was built on lies, Jake. Every moment, every memory. It's all tainted now. So yes, let's end it. But first, you're going to do something for me." Jake swallowed hard. "What?" "You're going to tell Ellen the truth. All of it. About your first marriage, about Emily, about why we're really getting divorced." The color drained from Jake's face. "Maggie, please. You know how my mother is. She'll never understand." "That's not my problem anymore," I said, a newfound strength in my voice. "You created this mess, Jake. Now you get to clean it up." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Jake and I froze, staring at each other. We both knew who it was. Ellen's weekly check-in visits hadn't stopped, even with me out of the house. "Perfect timing," I said, a grim smile on my face. "Here's your chance." Jake looked panicked. "Maggie, wait. We can talk about this. Maybe we can work things out." But I was already moving towards the door, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "No more talking, Jake. No more lies. It's time for the truth to come out." As I reached for the doorknob, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different, stronger, more determined. She was ready to face whatever came next. I opened the door to find Ellen standing there, her usual forced smile in place. "Maggie, dear, I didn't expect to see you here. Is everything all right?" I stepped back, gesturing for her to come in. "Actually, Ellen, Jake has something he needs to tell you." "Don't you, Jake?" As Ellen stepped into the house, confusion written across her face, I knew we were at a turning point. Whatever happened next would change all of our lives forever. And for once, I was ready to face it head-on. The tension in the room was palpable as Ellen looked between Jake and me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What's going on here? Jake, what do you need to tell me?" Jake's face was ashen, his eyes darting between his mother and me. I could see the internal struggle playing out across his features. Part of me wanted to step in, to shield him from this moment, but I steeled myself. This was his mess to clean up. "Mom," Jake began, his voice barely above a whisper. I haven't been entirely honest with you. With any of you." Ellen's confusion deepened. "What do you mean, dear?" I watched as Jake took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "Before I met Maggie, I was married. I have a daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. Ellen's face cycled through a range of emotions. Shock, disbelief, anger. "What are you talking about? This isn't funny, Jake." "It's not a joke, Mom," Jake said, his voice stronger now. "I have an 8-year-old daughter named Emily. I've kept her a secret all these years." Ellen turned to me, her eyes wide. "Maggie, did you know about this?" I shook my head. "I just found out recently. That's why I left." The realization dawned on Ellen's face. "So all this time, when I've been pressuring you for grandchildren, you already had one," I finished for her. Ellen sank onto the couch, her face pale. "I don't understand. Why would you keep this from us, Jake? From your own mother." Jake ran a hand through his hair, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "I thought I could start over, leave the past behind. I never meant for it to go this far." As Jake continued to explain, filling in the details of his past, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated, watching the truth finally come to light. But another part ached for the pain I saw on Ellen's face, the betrayal in her eyes. "And now?" Ellen asked, her voice trembling. "What happens now?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "We're getting a divorce." Ellen's head snapped up, her eyes locking with mine. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the overbearing woman who had made my life so difficult, but it quickly faded, replaced by a look of resigned understanding. "I see," she said softly. "I suppose I can't blame you, Maggie. Not after all this." The room fell silent again, the weight of everything that had been said hanging heavy in the air. I felt a sudden urge to leave, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of lies and betrayal. "I should go," I said, moving towards the door. "I just came to collect some things." As I reached for the doorknob, Ellen's voice stopped me. "Maggie, wait." I turned, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. Ellen stood, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I owe you an apology. For everything. The pressure, the judgment. I had no idea what you were going through." Her words caught me off guard. After years of tension between us, this moment of vulnerability felt surreal. "Thank you, Ellen," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." As I stepped out of the house, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The truth was out, the lies exposed. But as I walked to my car, a new realization hit me. This wasn't just the end of my marriage to Jake. It was the end of the life I had known, the future I had planned. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, as the full impact of everything washed over me. I was free from the lies, yes, but I was also alone. As tears began to fall, I realized that the hardest part of my journey was still ahead. Rebuilding my life, rediscovering who I was outside of Jake's lies and Ellen's expectations. But as I wiped away my tears and started the car, I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in years, my future was my own to shape. And whatever came next, I would face it on my own terms. I stood in the doorway of my new apartment, boxes scattered around me, the weight of finality settling on my shoulders. The divorce was official. Jake and I were over. As I began unpacking, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Can we talk? There's something else I need to tell you." My heart raced. What more could there possibly be? Despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, Jake was already there, looking haggard and defeated. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is it, Jake?" I asked, bracing myself for another revelation. He took a deep breath. "Remember when we were trying to conceive, and I insisted it must be you with the fertility issues?" I nodded, the painful memories flooding back. "I lied," Jake said, his eyes filling with tears. I knew all along it was me. I'm sterile. Maggie. I can't have children. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? I gasped, struggling to process this new information. After Emily was born, I had some tests done. That's when I found out. I couldn't face it, couldn't admit it to anyone. So I buried it, pretended it wasn't true. Anger surged through me. You let me believe it was my fault? You watched me suffer, blame myself, endure endless treatments and tests, and you knew all along. Jake reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I'm so sorry, Maggie. I was a coward. I thought if I admitted the truth, I'd lose you. I laughed bitterly. Well, you lost me anyway, Jake. And you lost yourself in the process. As I stood to leave, Jake called out, I never meant to hurt you, Maggie. I hope someday you can forgive me. I turned back, seeing the broken man before me. In that moment, I realized I did forgive him. Not for his sake, but for my own. I couldn't carry this anger anymore. I forgive you, Jake, I said softly. But I can't forget. Goodbye. Walking out of that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was finally out, all of it. As painful as it was also freeing. Back at my new apartment, I resumed unpacking. As I placed a framed photo on the shelf, a picture of me with my coworker Daniel at a recent company picnic, I smiled. Daniel had been a rock throughout this ordeal, offering support and friendship when I needed it most. Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was Daniel. How's the unpacking going? Need any help? I looked around at the chaos of boxes and smiled. Actually, yes. Want to come over? An hour later, Daniel and I sat on my new couch, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, sharing a pizza and laughing about office gossip. As I watched him gesticulate wildly, telling a story about our eccentric boss, I felt a warmth spread through me. This wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't the future I had envisioned when I married Jake. But as I sat there with Daniel, I realized it might be something better. Something real, built on honesty and mutual respect. What? Daniel asked, catching me staring. I shook my head, smiling. Nothing. I'm just happy. And I was. For the first time in years, I felt truly, genuinely happy. I had weathered the storm of Jake's lies, Ellen's pressure, and my own self-doubt. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more sure of myself than ever before. As Daniel and I clinked our soda cans in a mock toast to my new beginning, I felt a surge of excitement for the future. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. I had survived the worst and come out the other side. This was my second chance, my opportunity to rewrite my story on my own terms. And as I looked at Daniel, his eyes twinkling with warmth and understanding, I knew I wasn't facing that future alone. The road ahead might be uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to the journey. My new chapter was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where it would lead.